the NYPD, it should be known, has been working under what's known as the broken window policing since like Giuliani, since the 90s. And the idea was, this is a theory, and the theory is that if you're really hard on minor crimes, so if you really bust people for smoking weed in the street or jumping a turnstile or, whatever, you're really harsh on the small crimes, you will create an atmosphere of following the law. And therefore the major crimes, the real bad crimes will come down as well. Now, under Giuliani, they started this policy. That is why New York City always was like leading the country in like marijuana arrests and arrests for like small possession and things like that. And they were very, very harsh on that stuff. So of course, what you're ignoring in that philosophy is how many lives were affected, damaged, ruined because of those enforcing of crimes. Many crimes which we don't really think human beings should be thrown in a cage for. You catch a guy smoking weed outside, I don't know. I know there's like this old stereotype that whoever's smoking weed, they're not doing anything with their lives. A lot of those people have jobs, have things to do the next day, have to pick up their kids. How many jobs were lost because someone had to spend a night in jail for weed? How many families were damaged because someone wasn't there to pick up their kid? How many, you really can't even measure these things, but I'm sure it was a lot because we're talking about tens and tens of thousands of people who just were arrested, like you said, had something on their record, all of this stuff. It's the damage really is hard to calculate. But this was their philosophy for a long time and still is to this day. And the more recent version of it was what they call the Ferguson effect, which is basically the same thing, which is that after Ferguson, these blacks were so angry at the cops that the cops didn't want to cop so much anymore. These police just didn't want to police so much anymore, and then you saw violent crimes go up. Now, by the way, it was never a drastic increase in violent crimes. They really didn't prove their point, but that was their take. So, for all of you people out there who go, listen, these cops, they do a dangerous job. They do the best they can. Team Blue, we're good people. What happened was some crazy maniac from Baltimore came up to New York. This was right at the height of like Black Lives Matter starting and the anti-cop sentiment really going crazy. So this crazy black dude from Baltimore came up and murdered 2 cops. It was in Brooklyn, I believe it was. Just fucking execution style. Fucking murdered 2 cops as they were sitting in their car. It was sad. The cops, families and shit like that. Just, like a fucking terrible thing. And came up and murdered these fucking 2 cops. And then this department, these brave warriors, this was in late 2014 going into 2015. So just about 5 years ago, excuse me. So these brave warriors who do a dangerous job and do fucking these heroes, the New York City's finest, right? They decided to stop policing. This was their response. These same people who believe that violent crime will go up if they don't have this broken windows, Ferguson effect bullshit, they just decided to stop because they're so brave that as soon as a couple of them got killed, they go, we're not going to do it anymore. This was an unofficial NYPD slowdown. The head of the police union said, and I quote, he said, this was back in 2014. It was like November, December. He goes, we will only be making arrests when absolutely necessary, which is just an amazing quote. Because, shouldn't that be what arrests are to begin with? When absolutely necessary, which is arresting people for sport. But anyway, by their own logic, by their own bullshit philosophy, they go, yeah, we'll just let more people be harmed. That's how committed we are to keeping the streets clean. We're mad. We don't feel appreciated, so we'll just let you guys deal with the consequences. Only the problem was, none of it was true. None of it was true. This whole idea that we have to crack down on non-violent people and then violent people will stop being violent, which is so obviously absurd. No, it didn't happen at all. So they had this slowdown, and the crime rates, from all accounts, went down. I mean, I've seen it disputed a little bit where people say, like, you know, violent crime was about the same, maybe a little bit lower than New York, but certainly wasn't any uptick. All that happened was they stopped, and it was drastic. It was like, because this was at a time before, like nowadays in New York, they kind of just let people smoke weed on the street. They don't really fuck with you. Back then, 5 years ago, anyone who lives in New York who smokes weed, ask them. There's been a drastic change. It used to be like if you smoked weed on the street, you were risking going to jail that night. That was like a thing you had to be worried about. Everybody I know who smokes weed in New York City knows what I'm talking about. And they just stopped. It was like all of a sudden, you just didn't have to worry about that shit. And did nothing. And it was like nonviolent arrest rates fell by like 80%. Like it was really high. And had no effect. Everyone was just happy with it. They were thrilled. The police threatened us with a good time. And we were like, okay, we'll deal with that. And it was no problem at all. And these motherfuckers are so dense that they're threatening it again because this guy got fired. And back to your original point. I mean, this is really like, you're not saying, hey, this guy should go to jail for a long time. Like, I love and this is what I mean by the slave mentality and the religion of the state. If you...
A security guard. Just say, like, you're a security guard at a venue, and you choke somebody, and then they end up being murdered, and you think you're going to keep that job?
Well, look, but here's my thing,
and you don't think there's going to be an investigate, like...
This is what I mean by slave mentality. If a cop grabs your arm, let's just say he grabs your arm the wrong way. I've had this happen before to me, like where cops do shit like that, like grab you, put their nightstick up on you, like real weird thing just to be like a fucking alpha, just to be a dick. Because, you know, human beings don't do well with authority and impunity. So a lot of them are fucking pricks. Some of them are nice guys. I've met some cops who are nice guys before who are cool. But a lot of times they're dicks, more often than not. And if a cop came up and just grabbed your arm, let's say you're completely innocent of a crime, a cop just grabbed your arm and you slapped the arm down, you're going in for assaulting a police officer. Yet if they incorrectly just tackle you and throw you to the ground, it's like, oh, wrong guy. That's the slave mentality that I'm talking about. That you just believe that's your ruler and you're their subject. And you justify it with all this other religious bullshit. But that's the bottom line, is you believe they're your ruler and you're their fucking property. And that I just don't sign up for. I don't fucking believe that shit. Like, I don't know. But so, yeah. It like you said, the idea that, like, you're not even saying this guy's going to jail, he's not being charged with anyone, but they go, yeah, you got to find new work. You know, a guy's dead because you choked a guy and threw him on the ground in a situation that this isn't a situation, I mean, come on, like, be reasonable. This wasn't a guy holding people hostage. This isn't a violent threat. He was talking. It's like, yeah, okay, he wasn't following orders. He was not, as you were trying to grab his arm and put it behind his back, he wasn't letting you. Like, okay. To me, the moral of that story is like, God damn, you should only move in with that type of force when absolutely necessary. So anyway, yeah, the guy got fired. Like you would get fired from any other job. I
Even not for murder. You make the newspaper for fucking up big enough, and the company, the first thing they do to save face is go, we're sorry that happened, we're obviously letting that employee go. Only the cops go, nope, he's one of us. Yeah. And since he's one of us, you know, we would, it's insanity.
What's his name? My boy, Mance Raider, Pete Raymond, wrote a piece for this over at Libertarian Institute, which I thought was a really good piece. But he was talking about when we were at Mises University, he was quoting Will Grigg, but who was writing about this guy, and this has happened lots of times before, but this guy who was arrested for resisting arrest, and that was his only charge.
His only charge
he wasn't charged with anything else. There was no like underlying crime. He's just charged with resisting arrest.
The cops just walked.
So more or less, they went to go try to arrest him for the wrong reasons, and he resisted. So you still get charged for that
for just
resisting.
And did he end up getting in trouble for?
Yeah, got convicted. It's like this is the type of shit where like that's where I go like it's like no, and this is why the state can't have a monopoly. Because the
guy was in the right
on the police
for resisting arrest.
Look, in the same way that any time you deal with the state, right?
Yeah.
Here's the bottom line, and this is what the joke that I did on Libertas was like kind of getting at, and this is what a lot of shit that I talk about is. But the state if it wasn't for, then this is why I always say the thing like the state is like the mafia pretending to be the human rights organization.
Yeah.
I almost wish we could just remove the pretending to be the human rights organization and just deal with the mafia. Because once you recognize them as the mafia, look, you might be like, there might be another, the state are not the only ones who initiate violence on people. There's people like robbers and muggers and, like people who are thieves or whatever. But if you work at a store and there's like, oh, there's a whole bunch of people like who break in at night and have been stealing lately, I don't have to do a lot of work to convince you that what they're doing is wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, we get it. The only question is, how do we deal with this? How do we stop them from doing this, right? So this is the dynamic that's unique with the state, is that you have to actually get people to realize that that's what's happening to them here, okay? But the dynamic with the state is that you work for them. They've got it in your mind that they work for you. I've heard people actually shout this at police officers before as they're getting fucked up. You guys work for us. I know my rights. And then he tases that guy and he's on the ground like, oh yeah, do you? Do you know your rights? Oh, I can't hear you because you're wiggling around on the ground.
You got the right to piss yourself right now.
Right. It's like, but think about the dynamic there, that there's this human being screaming at someone else. I know what I was told about something that was written down on a piece of paper, as they yell at a guy with a gun who's just jacking them. It's like, okay, that's a nice idea you have. Here's reality. The dude with the gun who's not following that fucking thing that was written down on a paper. Turns out paper is not magical potions. It's not a spell. It's just what's written down, right? So, okay, you think that, here's the reality of the situation. You work for the state, quite literally. Quite literally. You go to work, produce, get compensated for that for that production, and then turn over part of what you've made to the state. You work for them in the most literal sense of the word. Everybody else who you meet in the market, they work for you. You go to the Apple store, they work for you. They produce a phone, you buy it from them. Here's your money for what you've worked for me. You work for me. The state is the boss. You work for them. And this is like the slave mentality, the religion of the state. This is what everybody knows. Any situation where you're dealing with the state, whether you're going to the IRS, the DMV, the TSA, it doesn't matter. You work for them. Are you ever greeted with hi, welcome to the TSA. How can we help you today? It's like, no. Through the scan, forward, back, computers out. You work for them. Go down to the DMV. Wrong line, that line. We need the other paper. You work for them. What are you going to do? Oh, you don't like it? You don't like that you have to take your shoes off and your belt off and someone's going to grab your balls? Okay, go. You're out. Then you can't fly. Oh, you want to go on another airline? We're there too. We're the monopoly. Only game in town. Or the DMV. Oh, you want a license? You want to fucking drive a car and not get thrown in a cage any random time we decide to pull you over? Okay, then you'll be here. You want to go to the other DMV? There is none. So deal with it. The IRS. That's it. Your money's mine. You fucked up, I'll ruin your goddamn life. That's all of them. That's the state. Any other situation, in a business situation, you're the boss.